So camera, no, general. Oh, there she is. All right, looks like we're live. We're live. And our guest is here. For those who are watching, hi, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on when you're watching this, whether live or replay. This is the voice and the face of Dr. Tululope Olabintan, Living Spring Family Medical Center here in Mansfield, Texas, where we help people live long and well because we believe that the quantity of your life is just as important as the quantity. I'm going to have my guest hop on. Gonna add you.
Hi, how are
Hi, how are
you?
you? Good, good,
Good
good, good
morning.
morning.
Good to
Nice to
see you
see
too.
you. All right, so I'm here with the Honorable Dr. Mila Marie, and I'm going to let you introduce yourself. But I'm so excited to be having this live with you, where we'll be
Absolutely.
talking about keto diets.
Yeah.
So before we go ahead, I'm going to hand over to you. Please kindly tell the guests who you are and what you do.
So as you said, I go by Dr. Mila. My full name is Dr. Kamilah Williams. I am a board certified family medicine physician and also board certified obesity medicine physician. And I am a metabolic health consultant for work, but I also help single moms and women live well and thrive intentionally by embracing a low carb lifestyle.
Awesome, awesome. So we're curious, okay, Doc. Why do you do what you do? Is there a story behind it?
Yes, absolutely. I started out like a lot of us probably have wanting to lose weight about five years ago now, and I had been on a weight journey for a while and had tried multiple different things and found that even though I was pretty active, my weight just kept climbing up. And I found that I just wanted a more natural way to approach it. I didn't want to have to do all of the I won't say work because that sounds really bad, but like I didn't want to have to do all of the weighing and tracking and all that stuff. I was like, there has to be a way to do this without that. So a lot of times I talk on my platforms about um, getting the book Nutrition for Dummies. It's kind of a funny story, but as physicians, we don't get a lot of detailed nutrition training on how to advise patients. We get advice or recommendations or we learn about the rare, obscure disorders of nutrition and deficiencies of nutrition, but we don't learn a lot about how to advise our patients. And so I was really going there too, like, how do I do this? And so I ended up finding the book The Obesity Code by Dr. Jason Fung, which is a lot about intermittent fasting. And he talks a lot about, as physicians, the limitations we have when it comes to nutrition. And it really resonated with me. So I started to follow what he was saying in the book. I'm like, there's no way this is going to work. And it worked. It was great. It gave me some of my time back because I was finding that I was trying to find things to eat just because in the mornings. And I had a small child at the time. So I was like, oh, this is great. This gave me my mornings back. Did that for a while. Wanted to get more into something that I could do to eat well during my feasting period. So when
Mhm.
you're fasting and feasting
Right.
periods. And I wanted to have something more intact, more nutritionally dense
More
time.
wholesome.
And
Yeah, yeah.
yes, yes. And he talked to me, or he talked to me, he talked to Dr. Fung. But in the book, he talks about low carb, and you start looking into it and reading about it. And over time, I started to adopt that lifestyle and ended up in the ketogenic space. I had never really heard of it, didn't know what it was, hadn't, really thought about it at all. But I found that I really was able to heal and improve a lot of things just by changing my
Mhm.
diet in that way. And so once I did that, it also dawned on me, or had dawned on me, that a lot of my patients had had the same issues where they would come to me and they couldn't lose weight, and I didn't know what to tell them. And I would tell them to do what I did, but it wasn't really working for me either. So it was like, okay, there's all these people coming in, they're having problems with weight, but they're also having a lot of problems with chronic disease. And so
Mhm.
I was noticing that there was more people with high blood pressure, diabetes, those things. And my whole schedule was full of that. And I was seeing much less of those, what we call acute visits, the colds and the UTIs and all of that. And I was like, what is going on? And so I talked to my colleagues about it. They're like, yeah, people are just sicker. We didn't really have a good answer for it. But when I was able to connect the two, I was like, wow, this is really something. And keto for me helped to improve that for myself, and I saw a solution for other people. And so now I'm very passionate about that, about wellness. The other piece of my journey was that I was on a spiritual journey of sorts at the time, kind of figured out that I needed to embrace my mental, emotional, and relational health, financial health during the time. And so I started working on myself as a whole during
Cool.
that time, and just really found a richness in life then. And so I became passionate about helping other people do the same thing.
That's awesome, and I've loved watching you. I did get the book, The Obesity Code. I'm reading it
Hmm.
too,
Okay.
and I agree with you. The sentiments on how, as physicians, we're not really taught how to use food as medicine or how to use
Hmm.
nutrition to help our patients. So I'm glad that
Yeah.
you took it on yourself. And this live is a product of patients asking, like, Doc, I want to try the keto diet. I've seen
Hmm.
people do it, feel better on it. It's hard for me not to say, will do it, so it was more a challenge to me to get to know more about this so I can better help my patients. So thank you for
Absolutely.
what you do. I'm glad that you
Thank
do it.
you. Thank
All right,
you.
so let's talk keto diet. What is it
Yes.
and why is it effective?
So keto is a natural state. It's something that our body does automatically when we don't eat, or when we eat a very low carb type of diet. And so the first thing I like to say about keto is it really isn't a diet. We've kind of adulterated the word diet in culture in general, that, we think diet and we think restriction, and,
Huh?
that it's going to be hard and you can't eat what you want and all of that. It's more of a lifestyle. And from that standpoint, I mean that it's focused on real, whole, natural foods, which a lot of people don't realize. Everybody thinks it's the meat and cheese diet. You eat a lot of those, really real foods is the focus of keto. But then you're also looking at ingredients and making sure you're eating the right things in that way. But in general, ketosis is a state the body goes into, like I said, when we don't have a high carb intake, when your body is fasting. Ketones are produced from the burning of fat, and that's the simple definition. So when you have, I always describe it as a seesaw. You have protein in the middle, you have fat on one side and carbs on the other. So those are your three macronutrients. Protein is a building block, so it holds the seesaw together, right? And then you have the fat on one side, carbs on one side. So if your fats are high, then your carbs are low. If your carbs are high, then your fats are low. And that's in general how we approach keto. Typically, it's a higher or moderate fat intake and a very low carb intake. And so by definition, keto is 20 grams to 50 grams of total or net carbs per day. And I can talk about what that means. But most people are eating 200 plus grams a day, just to give perspective. So a lot of times the thought is, well, if you're eating keto, you don't eat any fruits and vegetables, you don't eat any carbs. And it's not true. We just are really, really low on our carbohydrate intake. And so that's it in a nutshell. That's what it does. It's effective because we have this, I was just alluding to it, we have this, I call it a syndemic of, multiple medical issues, in the general population. But for me, my passion lies in health equity, and we're seeing a lot of problems in even especially the African American community, with diabetes and high blood pressure and all of that. All of those are related to something called metabolic syndrome, which involves, blood pressure issues, increased waist circumference, so weight around the middle, blood sugar issues, and then problems with cholesterol, HDL, and triglycerides. And when you start to develop those things, I think I had 3 out of the 5 when I decided to lose weight. I wasn't trying to heal myself. I was trying to lose weight. I found that keto really does help to improve and or reverse all of those problems. And so it really can be the solution to metabolic syndrome as well. So that is why it's so effective. That's a major thing. But it also provides mental clarity. I noticed my energy levels were higher. I didn't need caffeine to get through the day. It healed a lot of those little minor ailments, reflux, plantar fasciitis, all of those things. It sounds like this kind of weird magical thing, right? But it just really helps to decrease your inflammation, which is behind a lot of chronic disease as well. And then it also helps your body just re-regulate your hormones and everything to get back into that state we were meant to be in.
Awesome. Awesome. Now,
Yeah.
now it sounds like you've been doing this and it's a continuum. Now, would
Mhm.
you advise that this can be done long term? That this is
Um,
something
it.
to
Oh,
do
go ahead.
Yeah.
It's up for debate. There is a lot of different ways that people do keto. It is not a one size fits all type of plan. That's why I call it a lifestyle. There are people that are vegan or vegetarian, believe it or not, and follow a ketogenic lifestyle. And then there's people that are carnivore, which is the other extreme where they're not eating any vegetables. So there's multiple ways to do it. But when you talk about sustainability or doing, is it safe to do it? Technically, yes. We don't know for sure what the implications are of staying in ketosis for a long term. There are people that have done it for 10 plus years and are perfectly fine. So there is that anecdotal evidence that people can tolerate it well, but it's very individual in that sense. There is some discussion about flexibility, and we talk about metabolic flexibility, being able to kind of go for a while to the ketogenic side of things, and then slowly adding in certain whole healthy carbs. So like certain fruits and vegetables that you may not eat in the early stages of your ketogenic lifestyle, you may start to add in a little bit more. Some people stay where they are. So it's not necessarily dangerous because you're cutting out a lot of those foods that can trigger a glucose and insulin response and cause your body to go into those metabolic issues. But at the same time, you may be able to eat a little bit more of those whole healthy carbs and still experience the same benefits. And so there's not any known super negative reason to stay away from it forever. But the realistic part of it is, or stay into ketosis forever, but the realistic part of it is most of us will kind of flex back and forth. And so the goal is to be able to incorporate carbohydrates, more carbohydrates, and have your body be able to shift from fat burning to sugar burning and back and forth in a more healthy way. And so that is the goal. So a lot of people do end up, in a nutshell, adding back in some a little bit of a higher carb intake depending on their individual goals.
Okay, awesome. And of course, this is advice. It's important to have a discussion with your doctor, primary care doctor, about what will work best for you, depending on your medical issues. So really important to have individualized plans.
Absolutely.
These are suggestions to help you in your health journey. All right. So one of my concerns, and I've had this discussion with patients, is the concern from nutrient deficiency with avoidance of fruits and starchy veggies. Now, you already alluded to it, where you can have, because I've had patients who would say, oh, I have to eat fat. So fried chicken, lard, like lard in eggs, lard in a lot of things. Don't eat any fruit because they say that's starch. And so I'm concerned. I'm like, well, you eating a lot of fats, unhealthy fats, and then you're avoiding fruits and veggies. How do you balance the avoidance of fruits and starchy veggies? And I know, I think I'm answering the question because you've answered it ahead of time, saying that you do eat the fruits. You don't avoid it. It's just maybe lesser quantities, and you don't do the processed carbs. So how would you address that concern as far as nutrient deficiencies?
Yeah, it's a very real concern. The truth of the matter is there's a lot of, so most of us that eat keto are meat eaters, and that includes red meat. And what I have found is that was the only thing in my lifestyle that I didn't change. As far as the types of meat I ate, I eat a different quality of meat, which also plays a role as well, than I did when I was younger. But so a lot of us eat meat, and meat does have nutrients. So there's a lot of concern about saturated fat, about meat having certain health issues. And there's a lot of controversy about that. And some of it has to do with the way the studies were done. When they do studies, just briefly, when they do studies on foods, they're normally having people recall what they ate for the past year. I'm like, I can't remember what I ate yesterday, seriously. So it can be kind of skewed. People don't eat food isolated, in isolated. When we eat like a steak, we usually have something with that. When we eat bacon, we have something else with that. So we're having foods in combinations, and they're kind of making these assumptions or correlations based on that. And so the studies have to be looked at very carefully. What I find, and this is my own personal journey, is that I have all the nutrients I need because I eat a variety of foods. So if you're eating the same foods, even if you're plant-based and you eat the same foods over and over, you're missing out on other nutrients. And so I know that's a common concern, because it's like, well, if you're only eating berries and you're only eating certain vegetables, are you getting what you need? And the question is yes. I mean, the answer is yes, because there are ways to get that through your meats. Some people incorporate organ meats, liver. I eat liver. I know some people find it to be disgusting, but I love it. And then you add those healthy carbs in as well. So if you're doing a variety of foods, then, you usually will get what you need. You typically don't have to supplement. Now, the question comes in when you mentioned like frying things and doing that. Frying foods as a whole can be problematic because of the free radicals and things that are produced from the act of frying. The other thing is most of what we fry involves flour and grains, flour and wheat and things that go on the breading. And so that combination with fat is not great for us. So if you're going to eat that, that's more of a high carb diet. So like I said before, if you're doing that higher fat, you have to cut back on the carbs where you can. And so I think that's where the common denominator is. We all agree that processed foods are not great for us. We all agree that fried foods aren't great for us because of that breaded component. And then there's also some discussion, which I can talk about if you'd like, about the different types of fat, because you mentioned healthy fat. But you can have a well-balanced, well-formulated ketogenic diet or lifestyle just by making sure you're getting a variety of those foods in.
So variety is key. Variety is
Variety
key.
is
And
key. Yeah.
I like liver. I actually recommend it sometimes
Yes.
for my iron deficient patients. Now,
Yeah.
I have a question from a watcher. Hi, Tanisha. And she's asking that what would be some examples of healthy carbs? And I have these conversations a lot with patients because sometimes there's a lack of understanding on what's healthy and what's not healthy. So, Doc, what would you say to that
Yeah.
question?
So I think, carbs is another word that has been adulterated in a way. This was something that came up. You know how you're talking to patients and you keep saying a word, and you're like, I don't really like that word. I got to find a different word to use. So carbs was like that for me. Once I went to the ketogenic lifestyle, I was like, we say that word and it's such a blanket statement. It's a big umbrella that covers a broad range of things. So like broccoli is a carbohydrate, but
Yeah.
so is M&Ms. So it's just like those are
Right,
totally
right.
different foods.
Type of
And
carbs.
I think and it sounds simple, right? But a lot of people really struggle with that because when you say we don't eat carbs on keto, that's kind of what everybody says about keto. People think, oh, they don't eat any carbs. When you say it that way, it's like you don't eat broccoli, you don't eat this or that. But then when people think carbs in general, they're thinking of when they say, "Oh, I've cut back on my carbs," they're actually talking about the refined processed carbohydrates.
Right.
So it's a very tricky thing. It depends on what mindset you're in, what camp you're in, and all of that. But it's simply, most of, well, all vegetables and fruits generally are carbohydrates. So that is something that you can have on the ketogenic lifestyle. What we tend to avoid are the grains, pastas, rice type of carbohydrates. And there's a whole thing to say about that and the quality of those, but generally we avoid those completely. We do eat fruits. So usually low glycemic index fruits that don't spike your blood sugar as
Okay.
much as some other fruits. And we're really after that insulin response. That's a whole other ball of wax. But essentially, you want those foods that aren't going to spike your blood sugar as much. And those are, your berries. We will have lemons and limes because you can't really sit and eat a lemon or lime, so it has a little bit more carb in it, but you can use the juice. You can put it in slices in your water, things like that. Cucumbers, Brussels sprouts, anything that's not a starchy vegetable, which are typically those root vegetables, the ones that grow under the ground, are typically the ones we avoid. Now, that being said, if I decide to do what I call a carb up or a flex day, where I'm going to eat a little bit more carb, I may have a sweet potato because it's lower glycemic than the white potato, and
Yes.
those kind of things, and you can incorporate those things. It's not going to kick you out of ketosis forever. Your body's not going to fall apart. But it is a way to get those other foods in. And so a lot of my friends and colleagues that do keto do incorporate those things. So there's a lot of carbohydrates. You can have broccoli. People use a lot of cauliflower on keto. We eat a lot of avocado, but those are things you don't have to eat that. You can make it your own and make sure that, you're getting those healthier carbohydrates. Now, when we talk about that, we're talking about real whole plant-based foods, plant foods. When you're talking about carbs, in society, that's your candy, cakes, pies, all that stuff you want to pretty much stay away from. And I find that has also helped me with my sugar addiction. So it changes your taste buds as you start to taste the natural sweetness of food versus those artificial sweeteners and things that are in processed foods.
And just to clarify, white rice is one of those that you tend to say stay away from. And
Mhm.
would you suggest more like the quinoa
Mhm.
and the brown rice as well over
Mhm.
those if someone were to get carb?
It depends on your goals, you know. So if you are, and this is something else that I think is somewhat of a limitation of keto, it helps people kind of know what to do, right? You know, 20 to 50 grams, I know what to focus on. So when you have that, if you eat rice, that's going to take up a big portion of your carbohydrate intake for the day. And so we tend to avoid it. It also raises your blood sugar
Blood sugar.
significantly. And so that's something to think about. But if you're looking from a wellness standpoint and saying, okay, I definitely want to incorporate rice into my lifestyle, then I would go for more the wild rice or brown rice. White rice tends to be more processed, more bleached, and all of that stuff. And that's part of keto as well, is really looking at ingredients and what they're doing to your food, how much it's been, not only if it's been processed, but how it's processed, you know, because slicing an avocado is processing, right? But then
Right.
if you have like an avocado powder that has all this other stuff in it, that's a
It's
whole
different.
different ball game. So when I think of keto, I think of that careful attention to ingredients and detail like that.
So it looks like, and this is a recurring theme with every diet. There's a healthy way to do it, and there's an unhealthy way to do it.
Absolutely.
You can eat a high fat diet, and the fat does not translate even to weight loss or you feeling better.
Mm-hmm.
So it's the type of fat you're eating. Same thing with the
Mm-hmm.
carb. You could do a low carb diet, but if you're doing the carbs that are not healthy for you, that shoot your sugars up, then
Mm-hmm.
it doesn't result in the change that you're looking for. So
Mm-hmm.
thank you. This is helpful. So there's
Absolutely.
a way to do it right, and the goal is
Yes.
natural, less processed, in the sense of refining or stripping of natural nutrients.
Yes.
All right, my next question for you, and this has been very helpful. Thank you. Cholesterol changes. So I have
Yes.
patients who go on a keto diet. Can you check my cholesterol?
Mm-hmm.
Check it, and cholesterol is high. What would you advise as far as heart disease prevention when it comes to that?
So this is a very loaded question, but I love it. It's one of my favorite topics when it comes to keto. This is something that changed my career trajectory of like really seeing how we can look at this differently. So it is true that the total cholesterol and the LDL can go up on a ketogenic lifestyle. But there is something to be said for how you're doing it. So what you were referring to is the quality of the food you're eating, the quality of those macronutrients is very important. I've been calling it like Tetrising. You remember the game Tetris? You know, we
Oh, yeah,
have
yeah,
a
yeah,
50-gram carb intake, and I'm going to fit everything I love in that 50 grams versus saying, let me make some changes gradually and get to a more whole foods approach. So that's what I mean by Tetrising. And so that really comes into play with cholesterol and lipids. One of the most common things I tell patients, which you probably have had to have that discussion as well, is like the total cholesterol is just not it. When I was in residency, that's all we checked, you know, and we would see it was high and then we would check the other numbers. But being a metabolic health consultant gives me the opportunity to see multiple different versions of that. And I've seen high total cholesterol that is has all normal, the other numbers are all normal. And then I've seen, the low or normal total cholesterol and all the other numbers are abnormal. So you have HDL, which is your good cholesterol, your cleanup
yeah.
crew. You have the LDL, which we've mentioned, which we traditionally call the bad cholesterol, but it has quality to it. There's a good and bad component to the LDL. And then we have the triglycerides, which is the way your body stores glucose in the fatty tissue. So this is something that becomes very nuanced, very important. So what I tell my patients and clients is to look at the HDL and triglyceride. Those, in most cases, will go to normal ranges or improve on a ketogenic lifestyle. So the triglycerides and HDL are two components of the metabolic syndrome. So you only need 3 to have metabolic syndrome. So if those are off, if the HDL is low and the triglycerides are high, then you have metabolic syndrome and an increased risk for heart disease and strokes and all of those things. And so by default, keto helps to improve those along with decreasing the waist circumference, which is that abnormal collection of fatty tissue around the midsection. It also can help with blood pressure. So it really helps to improve all of those things. But when we talk about cholesterol, the LDL goes up. And in medicine, we focus on LDL. We're like, LDL is high. That means you need a statin. That means that you have an increased risk for heart disease. And there is some truth to that because of that bad type of LDL that it can cause more of a problem. The issue is the standard lipid panel doesn't show that. So sometimes you may need something called a lipoprotein NMR to be able to tease out what type of LDL you have. And it will tell you if you have pattern A, which is the better type, or pattern B. And so that can be really helpful to determine what's going on with your cholesterol. But it's more than just those regular numbers. But like I said, keto can increase the LDL. But what the thought is that it's increasing it to more of the pattern A. And then another step people take sometimes is doing a coronary artery calcium score, where they'll go and have a CAT scan to see if they actually physically have blockages or plaques in their arteries. And it can tell you if they have a problem. A lot of people that do keto or intermittent fasting, depending on how they do their fasting, will have very low scores on that test despite having high LDL. Now, that is not standard. It's still being studied. There's a big study going on about it right now, but it is shifting. It's something that's shifting, that we need to look at it a little differently. And a lot of doctors are even comfortable not doing a statin if that CAC score is low, but you have to talk to your doctor. And some people will have a very high LDL that is genetic. So you have to be careful with that as well. And in those cases, some people may need to dial back on the saturated fat intake because that does increase the LDL, whereas grains and higher carb foods, even higher natural foods that are higher in carbohydrates can lower the LDL. So there's a balance there.
Okay, so the more to look at, you try LDL. It's almost like to the numbers, right?
Cutting out for me
LDL
a
to a
bit.
certain degree. Dr. Mila, did you hear me?
I heard bits and pieces. It was kind of cutting out. Sorry about that.
Can you hear me, Dr. Mila?
I can hear you now. Yes.
Okay, you hear me? Okay, good. So I was saying that it sounds like the bigger focus is not necessarily on the total cholesterol, is on the triglycerides, your HDL, and then you got to tease out the LDL some. The LDL in itself, it may not be instructional. So these are conversations to have with your primary care doctor. Again, the emphasis is healthier fats, which Dr. Mila has alluded to. And I'm glad that we're having this conversation. Keto diet is a possibility, but you got to do it the right way. Now, Doc, people are wondering, they're like, man, this doctor is amazing. I like what she does. I'd like to follow her. Where can people find you?
So I spend a ton of time on Clubhouse. Clubhouse is an audio app. I found my keto people there. So there's several groups that I'm in there, Keto for the Soul, Keto Saved My Life. And these are all people just like you that have gone and decided to do the keto lifestyle. A lot of them have not had success in the past, but where I land there as a physician is being able to hear stories and hear these anecdotal things that help me to be a bigger believer in keto as a whole, and seeing people live it out. It really gives me a lot of information to focus on. And when I deal with or talk to other people, it really helps me to understand that. So that's a great community to join. I am also part of a group expert in the Black Girl Keto Revolution, which you can look that up on Clubhouse and also on Facebook and Instagram. My own platform is my podcast, The Single Well. So I focus a lot on the pillars of wellness and eating and moving and living intentionally and thriving well. So those are all things that I am a part of. And you can reach me directly on Instagram at the Christian Wellness Doc. I answer, inboxes and things there. So definitely reach out if you have any questions. And then the links to my coaching program and podcast are there as well.
All right, awesome. Thank you so much. It was awesome being with you, talking to you, getting to glean from you. Thank you so much. And I hope to do this again with you. So thank you all for watching. Of course, if you're watching this live, I was supposed to say this earlier, #live. And if you're watching this on replay, #replay. But please share this with someone who will find this useful. And as always, it was nice being here with you live. So someone's asking, The Single Well, that's a podcast, right?
Yes.
Said,
yes.
So you can find that on, Apple, what are your podcasts?
Oh, any of the networks. I go through Buzzsprout, so I use Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts. I think one is Pod Notes or something. All of the podcast platforms, it's on there.
All the podcast
Yeah.
platforms. Yeah, she's on there as Single Well. All right, and what I'll do is I'll get your information. I already have it, and I'll put it on the post as well, so people know where to find you. Okay.
Awesome. Yeah.
All right, great. So thank you all for watching. Once again, this is the voice and face of Dr. Olabintan of Living Spring Family Medical Center here in Mansfield, Texas. If you or anyone you know is looking for an awesome primary care doctor who's thorough, who's passionate, who's caring, I am she. Thank you all for watching. Bye.